Hey guys, I wanted to talk about this 2.5 liter Chrysler we were working on. It's a 2000 Sebring JXI. A little history on the vehicle. It was at another shop. It was broken down and towed there. Vehicle was there for a couple of days. They determined that it had no spark, and we're not sure how to diagnose it, which give them credit for that, for not just throwing parts in this car and sending it to us instead to actually check it and diagnose it correctly. When the vehicle came in, we, you know, we had to decide, as we always do with these kind of things, how to approach the diagnosis. And I thought this was a really good example to show, you could go down a different path, or the wrong path, real easy with a car, if you don't if you don't check it correctly from the very first test. Okay, so knowing how to approach a no start problem is the basic point of this video. What we're going to do is we're going to put a spark tester on one of the ignition wires, and we're going to put a Noid light on one of the injector connectors. First thing, okay, because I want to know right off the bat, did we lose spark? Did we lose injectors? Another test would be to put a fuel gauge on the vehicle, see if we lost fuel pressure. But the easiest things to do in this case were to check spark and injector pulse. These tests determine our next move. In this case, we found that we had injector pulse and we had no spark. Okay, so I want to just run through some stuff with you here. Keep in mind here that this car still uses a distributor. It doesn't have coil on plugs. It doesn't have a coil pack. It has an actual distributor that has a coil built into it and sends the spark out from the distributor to each plug via ignition wires. So it's not a very difficult system, though this car is a little bit difficult because of where the distributor is located. So it's a little tight to work on. It's a little hard to video some of the stuff, but I tried my best to show you the important things. What I wanted to do is, though, I wanted to make a point here too, that, like I said, every car works different. Every vehicle may have an ignition system, but they don't all work the same. So once we determine that we have no spark in our vehicle, what's our next move? Well, I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything, right? We can't remember everything. So we refer to a wiring diagram of this system, and we determine what our next test is going to be. All right, I got the wiring diagram here on the computer screen. I'm going to show you. Here's our wiring diagram. So I highlighted a couple of things here. One, actually I'm going to highlight this too. One of them is this number 4 pin up top, black and gray, ignition coil 1 driver, right? All right, well, if we follow that, I'm going to highlight it in blue here so we can make it a little clearer. This is going right to our distributor. Okay, ignition coil number 1. Well, there's only one coil on the vehicle, so that's all we have to worry about. Alright, that's one thing. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Now, you got the other wires here at this distributor, right? We have a cam sensor, okay? We have, that's a signal wire for the cam sensor. We have 5-volt supply, that's your reference voltage. We have a sensor ground, right? And we have a ground here. So what are we going to do here? How are we going to approach this thing to test it, to find out what is keeping us from getting spark in this vehicle when it's cranking? I wanted to test this thing quick. I didn't want to waste a lot of time with something that I pretty much had an idea of what was wrong with it already based on the symptoms. So I just wanted to verify a couple of things, alright? So this is how we did it. One, and keep in mind here, these connectors are very difficult to get to on this vehicle without taking things apart. And I didn't want to take a lot of stuff apart and not be able to run the car or crank the car. So I was able to reach back there after a little playing around and disconnect our 2 connectors, okay? The one connector only has 1 wire in it. It's this dark green and orange, which is your power feed. Now, this wire, I was pretty sure was good, okay? Without testing it, I was pretty sure that it was going to be there. I was going to have my 12 volts here. How did I know? How do I know that? Well, see what this says, Asd Relay out? Okay. Asd Relay is your main relay for this vehicle. It's like a lot of guys that may be familiar with Honda's main relay. This is a main relay in a Chrysler. It puts on, or it turns power on to your computer. 12 volts to your computer. It's going to put 12 volts to your distributor. It's going to put 12 volts to all of these things that are highlighted down here. All of these lines that are highlighted. This is all the same feed. Okay, heated oxygen sensor. These are your fuel injectors. All right, it's going to power all this stuff up. Now, if you remember, we have injector pulse in this vehicle, right? In order to have injector pulse, it means that we have to have this dark green and orange wire supplying power to our injectors. All right, because we would have no injector pulse. Okay, so everybody got that. If we didn't have power, our power supply to these injectors, we would absolutely not have injector pulse while we're cranking this vehicle. So we know that this ASD relay is working. We know that the injectors are powered up. We're going to assume the O2 is getting power, and we could assume that we're getting power here to this distributor. Of course, anything is possible, right? You see all these splice joints where this dark green and orange wire branches off. So, well, let's say for the sake of argument that something clipped this wire somehow and we lost power. We would have only lost power maybe to the distributor, right? So that would have also caused us to have no spark. The odds of that happening, I mean, they are possible, but they're pretty slim. So I'm just trying to show you guys how we're how we're thinking while we're diagnosing these cars, okay, and we're looking at this wiring diagram. And again, I can't stress how important it is to understand wiring diagrams and really understand them. Not just look at something and be able to follow a wire, but to know, to understand what these wires are doing and why they're doing it and how they work in the grand scheme of things, right? So, before I get off track, I said I assumed that this wire is good, okay? But I'm not going to leave it at that, because leaving it at that would, again, possibly take me off the right track of diagnosis. So I'm going to verify. I'm not going to overlook something like that. I'm going to verify that this wire, with the key on, or cranking, has 12 volts. Okay, so that's what I did first. And it did have 12 volts. Everything was okay here. Provided that I have my ground as well. All right, I should have this ground as well. So this was checked. The ground was good. All right. I want to mention that, don't lose a ground. Don't get fooled by something like that. We did have a ground here. Anyway, knowing that we have power, knowing that we have ground, and knowing that we have injector pulse is telling us that our circuit here should work as long as we have this. Okay, if we have activity on this wire, and again, even if I don't know how this works, I know that something should be happening on this wire, okay? So let's take, for the sake of argument, I have no idea how this works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my scope on this lead, all right? And I'm going to check it. I'm going to crank the vehicle over with my scope set up on here, and I'm going to see what's happening. I'm going to set it. I'm going to start this up on I'm going to start this off on a 20 volt scale, and maybe 100 milliseconds. And see what happens. See if I have anything going on. Well, once I did that, you'll see in the video that I do have activity here. Well, that's telling me right there that all of my wiring up to this point and all of my circuits in this vehicle are working, except for the ignition coil. All right. When I have my activity here, that's telling me that it's working. Now, you could go into this vehicle, just as another little tidbit of info here, you could go into this vehicle through the scanner, and you can check what's called Actuator Mode. You could actually turn this coil on with the scan tool, all right? It'll pulse this coil through the scanner, and you can see if it's working. Now, that's all well and good, but I knew I had no spark here, right? So if I go on and I pulse this thing I still don't know if I have a problem at my computer. Okay, I could still have a bad computer here. All right, that's possible. I could have a broken wire from the computer to the ignition coil, right? I'm still leaving a lot of information out of the equation here if I just try to pulse this through the scan tool. All right. So if I go with my scope and I check this line, and I know that I have activity on this line, now I know that the computer's working correctly. It is trying to pulse this coil. I know that this wire from the computer to the coil is good as well. Okay. I left all of the doubt out of this test. You understand what I'm saying? So there's no need for me to use the scan tool in that way when I could just hook up a scope here and check, because let's face it, if I put the scan tool on here and try to fire this driver, it's not going to work. I'm not going to have spark. So I'm going to be right back where I am now. Okay, I have no spark. The computer's not firing this coil. So what do I do now? What's my next move, right? I have to, somewhere along the line, I have to get to this black and gray wire, and I have to check this to verify that everything is working. All right. Again, the shortest distance between 2 points and all that, happy stuff. Well, this is it. I mean, this is where you're at. You want to go through these tests as quickly as you can, and you also want to do this as accurately as you can without getting off track. Now, this is relatively simple stuff. This isn't, anything too involved, but with any system, no matter how involved it is, this is always the way you want to do things. You want to strategically approach the problem, and you want to do it in a timely manner if possible, right? So this is where we're at. Okay, we know now that our circuit's good. We know everything is good. So what are we going to do from here? We're going to put a distributor in this vehicle, and we're going to start it up. We're going to put it back. We're going to make sure it runs. We're going to put it back together, and our customer's going to be back on the road. And that's exactly what ended up happening with the car. We put it back, we put a new distributor in it, and everything was well again, okay, for the customer. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a couple of things here, on the car as we were actually working on it. I couldn't show you everything because it's just a little bit too difficult to try to film because my hands are getting in the way and things, and there's not a lot of room to work. But I'm sure you'll get the drift of it, and like I said, the point of making this video was to show you again another example of how to attack a problem with a car, from the start and not get off track. And I hope that somebody out there likes it. I hope you guys enjoy it, and thanks for watching. All right. All right. So check the injector pulses. Okay, so now we know we have injector pulse, we have no spark. We'll confirm that. So the first thing we're going to do is, going back to this diagram, is we're going to take a look right at the distributor at our ignition coil trigger, which is the black and gray wire. Alright, this is the driver for the coil. We already have our scope hooked up on here, and we're going to see if we have a trigger from the PCM to put this coil on.